Om Shutehe Shatagunam Vidyan Mananan Mananad Api Nidhi Jasam Lakshagunam Anantam Nirvikalpakam. Hearing about Brahman, the divine reality, is good. Taking teachings on Brahman is better. Meditating directly upon Brahman is better still. And best of all is that meditation in which all doubt about the nature of reality dies away forever. Om yato vacho nivartante aprapya manasa saha ananda brahmana vidvan navibeti kutasjaneti. Om shantihi shantihi shantihi. That from which mind and speech fall back in awe, unable to comprehend or express it. The one who realizes the bliss of that Brahman destroys fear forever. And so it is. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om Tat Sat. So wonderful to see us all gathered again as another week has ticked by on the cosmic clock here in the river of time. The only thing not being in time right now is our Atman. Everything else is flowing along in those cycles, but our witness is standing by, always on call, hopefully, and of open access to us so that we can withdraw from all the phenomena of life, whether it be projected by nature or Maya or the delusions or misunderstandings of our own mind. And that's basically what the devotees of the Lord and Divine Mother of the Universe have slimmed it all down to, what we're up against. For the rest, unfortunate as they are, there are so many other things that are crowding in on them to take away their precious attention from the moment, from the presence, from divine reality. So that Atman, we try and focus our mind and our thoughts upon it. And so our fears get assuaged and our doubts get curtailed. And that's what the Upanishads that I chanted from just now are always encouraging us to do. Is that peace that passes all understanding that Jesus talked about, and the peace that you need first and foremost that Sri Sharda Devi, Holy Mother, our mother, talked about, are always available to us in a thrice. A nice expression that Swamiji picked up from the English. It happens in a thrice. Those moving tirthas get their illumination in a thrice. That is, right away, as soon as they draw breath, see themselves in the body, then they put in that element of discrimination between the real and the unreal and withdraw from the latter and take to the former. And so that does away with their fears and doubts. And so what's left then is this display of name and form in time and space that's there in front of the senses. So with the senses, then they decide, well, I guess I'll just purify them. And so then the matter becomes a matter of mind. So they said, well, I guess I'll just make the mind non-dual. And then they look at the intellect with all its thoughts, chitta, the chitta vritti is floating around. And they think, well, I should just take the thoughts and put it at what's on most real, what's most beneficial. And then that only leaves that ego standing all alone without its usual coverings to support it. And that begins to deflate. And as we say in Ramakrishna style Vedanta, begins to ripen. And as it ripens, it realizes that it has to offer itself to a higher authority. And so this is how spiritual aspirants of a sincere nature look out upon the world of name and form and time and space and reduce everything down to these few elements to consider. And then they'll sit in rapt meditation upon those final elements of life and breathe and think and act and do everything else in that peace that passes all understanding. So all one needs to do is recall that. And if you're having trouble recalling it for yourself in these difficult times, when the collective consciousness is also spreading out and trying to influence us, I meant to tell you, as I came out of my dream state this morning, so I should tell everyone that some of those negativities and difficulties that you're feeling and having with life and mind are also rolled into that package called the collective mind. So that brings up two things. One, that we have to reject all of that negativity and stand strong against it. And two, that we have to do positive acts and keep positive thoughts, because that will help the world too. As I said in my God blog yesterday, 4 yogas, right? 1 for seeing God, the other 3 for helping the world. The one that you see God through is knowledge. Self-knowledge stands supreme among them all. And then you increase your love for the Lord. And then you meditate upon divine reality as your own self, hopefully, or eventually. And then you do all your works for the good of mankind, so that Bhakti, Raja Yoga, and Jnana and Karma Yoga find their place. But the extreme goal, that is the absolute goal of life, is self-knowledge. That's what reveals to you. So if the world is unreal, then the next thought should be, then that means I'm the only reality. And that's how great seers and saints become who they are and stand forth and live such exemplary lives. That's what we have to emulate. And so these great teachings from the Upanishads and Vivekachudamani and Bhagavad Gita that I started off with this morning set the stage for that. For the next 55 or 50 minutes, let's look into that and see if any of this has called forth some things from you to share with our Sangha here. Who's going to begin?
Namaste, Babaji, and namaste, everyone else. Thank you for starting off the class with all of that. And it got me thinking about something that I've been reading that I brought up last week. I'm still reading through Swami Ashokananda's Let Us Be God. And in it, he talks about something that I hadn't heard in this way before. And he's talking about the 3 powers. And the 3 powers that he describes are the power of attainment, the power of restraint, and the power to just be. And the reason that he brought it up is that he was bringing it up as a tool to kind of check in with yourself at what stage you're at spiritually and work towards that power of just being. And he was saying kind of what you started off the class with. If you can just realize this, you will just be in that power of being. You will just be, and you will attain what we're talking about. But most people don't have that ability, and you got to go through the process of neti neti. And I feel like that's what the power of restraint that he's talking about is actually restraining all these senses going outward. And I think most people, without even having spiritual practice, cultivate that power of attainment. And then the whole world is just running on that power of attainment. And no one thinks about drawing inward. And I thought that was a really beautiful teaching, because I really appreciate teachings that allow you to check in with yourself at what stage you're at and how you're doing and how to keep it going in the right direction. So, do you mind just expanding on that a bit?
I could certainly try. You've put it very well yourself, and that's why we like Nikhil as one of our icebreakers for these events, because he does have such a straightforward way of both taking in the teachings from the Vedanta literature and then expressing them well. And I would say that Swami Shogananda's teachings very apropos as it is for this day and age. I was thinking about when I was reading Swami Vivekananda yesterday, and somebody brought up the word civilization, and he immediately said, it's a sign of a civilized nation isn't necessarily that you have a lot, and that you fill everything with machinery and such things, and the mechanics of everything outwardly going on, but that India had always been civilized in the way that it was always trying to tell people to be satisfied with what they have and maybe even do with less. So the tendency of India in the time of the ancient rishis, when these Upanishads were put out, was, I think, more focused on being, as you're saying there, than on attainment. If there was a lacking inside of oneself and one felt a gap or a hole or a dissatisfaction with the world, with life and so forth, then the solution was always, let's get rid of all these things so I can concentrate on who I am, instead of let's add more to see if I'll get happier, which according to Swamiji was really not the civilized way. You try and do with less, and you try and renounce and thin things out so that you can see the reality. As I was just saying earlier, self-knowledge. So when you see the self, then you become satisfied in the self, as the Upanishads say. And as we were talking about last week, and one of you brought it up about the Bhagavad Gita, that when they see the Atman, then they've found that which will satisfy them forever, and which will do away with all sufferings. And then you can sit in that peace of mind that Holy Mother talks about, and be. We used to make the distinction between the two modes of being and becoming. So it's not that becoming is a negative or a bad thing, but yourself is kind of standing back in disbelief that you've bought that package, that you have to become something when you're already the entirety of everything. All is Brahman. And so is everything around you, all is Brahman. So that was one of the measuring sticks, is if you're not seeing that in yourself and in others, like I think that's what was meant by Jesus when he said, love thyself and love thy neighbor as thyself and so forth, is that you're not really seeing Brahman in them yet. Then there has to be some things that have to be taken out of the picture, some weights, some veils, some modifications, some vibrations of mind, some chitta vrittis that aren't in balance or are not in yoga. So you can, like I think you were talking last week, I think about waking up with that thought, Nietzsche Sarga, and then going into the whole day with starting out with this affirmation of being one with Brahmanness, one with yourself, one with everything, and having that harmony as your first thought, and maybe the last thought before you go to bed at night. And I think for a while too, the mantra acts as that kind of determinator, that it'll cause you to remember that all of this is divine, and that I should be looking at it like that. And if I'm not, then there's some more work to do, and then I have to become. I have to enter into that mode of becoming, and so that I can just be. So then one morning I woke up and my delusion was gone, utterly gone, and I was who I am. And then I didn't have to think about evolution or growth or losing anything. I didn't have any fears or doubts, as we started out this morning saying. The fears and the doubts went away, and I just had this peace that ensued from that moment on, and gave me that ground of existence, as Meister Eckhart calls it, that you can just rest upon without any restlessness, without any desire to move away from it. And then found out further that you can be actuating everything from that ground of existence. That is, your movements, your thoughts, and actions, all comes from that place. So, as what you just said, it's like you like the teachings that help you to check in with that, with yourself, with the truth, and those will bring you immediately, in a thrice, straight to that truth, that I am Atma Brahma, this self is Brahman, and it never has been anything else than that, and it never will be anything other than that. And talk about a moment of calming and centering that they talk about. And it hasn't necessarily been brought about by healing or by catharsis or by therapy or by physical means. It was just a return to that, to the center, to the presence that you've been calling by names: heaven, angels, children, wealth. And then all of a sudden you see that all of that is just always there in that center, and thou art that. And thou art that. Sannyasin Bowles say Om Tat Sat Om, as Vivekananda said at the end of every verse of his beautiful song that he wrote for us. So anyway, some thoughts perked by your beautiful beginning. Does it perk thoughts in anyone else?
I have a question. I've been contemplating the difference between the ego and the witness. It seems like my intellectual understanding is the witness is more subtle and inclusive, and the ego would sort of be a subset of the witness. Although it's from the point of view of experience, it just seems to be like a very subtle difference. How do we distinguish between, if we're seeing if it's our ego observing, or if it's the more subtle or the more universal witness?
Well, is that feeling of the unclean feeling that you have when you're operating from the ego,
Yeah.
which that makes you kind of shudder and maybe even look over your shoulder to see who's there. Something suspicious in it all.
Because sometimes if I'll think, oh, I think there's some wisdom coming through, and I think, no, that's my rascally mind trying to kind of rationalize. And it's hard to sometimes distinguish between what the pure Sakshi Bhutam, the witness, and then there's the ripe ego, of course, and then there's so I guess you get more subtle when it becomes like the difference between the ripe ego and the witness. And is there a difference?
It's a beautiful thing to contemplate at the level of alambanas, where you're looking at sections of yourself, of your outer self or your non-self, if you want to be really radical about it. You're beginning to do as Neti Neti, as Nikhil said, you're doing that in a more natural way. First, you did it because you thought you had to, but now you're looking, as Father of Yoga says, at these different levels of your being to see how they measure up to the truth. The truth being more your Atman, but the witness is much more able to access and assess the truth, than the ego is. It's timely that you bring it up, because I came across a statement in the scriptures yesterday. Said that the ego and the witness are just the one and the same thing, and the witness and Brahman are just one and the same thing. So they always try and bring you back to this clarifying position, that because when you begin to analyze things, you might say it's it's maybe one, if not the only danger to Jnana Yoga is that you begin to overanalyze things and don't get to the point. Like, when Swami Vivekananda came back to India after his triumphant time over here, and the Sanskritists and the Puntas and the Brahmin priests and everything were getting together and trying to find holes in him, they were all coming from the Purva Mamamsa standpoint of rationale and analysis, but he was totally ensconced in the Uttama Mimamsa. That is basically the difference between Purva Vimamsa and Uttama Vimamsa is that one is the Vedanta. So Vivekananda was established in the conclusions of the Upanishads, and all of the rest of India was still, the intelligentsia of India, you might say, was still ensconced in analysis and rationale. So he was trying to convince him about the conclusions, Vedanta Siddhanta of that. And so that's where the witness takes over, and the ego has to sort of fall to the back, take a back seat. And that's why I chanted in awe, the mind and ego fall back from that Brahman if it catches a glimpse of it. And then all fear and doubt begins to be destroyed. And so it is. So we saw that happening in the case of a great soul like Vivekananda, who was right on the scenes, wasn't like kind of hidden away somewhere, like the Tibetans for hundreds of years, or Sri Ramakrishna for so long. It had to come out and be demonstrated that the conclusions of the Vedanta were to be accepted and worked into our life. And we had to quit laboring over all the minutiae of philosophy. So Vivekananda was always saying, bring the Vedanta out of books, bring it out of temples, and spread it broadcast throughout the world. And do that after you can improve the condition of the world. That give people enough to eat, enough to drink, food and basic water and basic clothing, and then immediately put their minds, before it gets into the satisfaction and pleasures of those things, and too much begins to accumulate, begin to place their minds on that economy of the truth, just by knowing the Mahavakyas and the great souls and the great teachings and the scriptures, is a kind of economy that the mind can let go of all these extraneous things that the ego loves so much, and which you see all about you nowadays. When I just mentioned the collective consciousness, then you're feeling that every day you wake up, and you're feeling everyone's collective ego and what they want, what they desire, what they think they need, who they think they are. I mean, you could go out and make a big long list of all the things that the economy of truth and the conclusions of the Vedanta would just cut away right away if the mind knew how to focus on what was real, what was essential, what was beneficial to them. And so that's what we'll be looking at Sunday after next. I don't know if it's come out in the promo yet, but the Ksharika Upanishad, I'm going to start teaching from that. I've been looking at it for a long time. And so the next Sunday series after tomorrow, Sunday after tomorrow, we'll start with the Ksharika Upanishad, which means sharp knife that cuts away worldliness, the knife of knowledge, the wisdom of otherworldliness, if you want to put it that way. So that's what the aspiring, inward moving aspirant wants to get a hold of, that sharp mind, that honed intellect, because then it will cut away everything extraneous, and then it can see the self and be satisfied in it. How else is it going to happen if you don't accomplish that feat? You might say the past 3 Sundays, that is, if we include tomorrow, we've been looking at that in terms of Vedanta's eternal perfection and yoga's storing up of power. So the yoga, you want to be doing your yoga like the four yogas all the time, because unbeknownst to most people, it's storing up power that you'll be able to use later when the time is ripe. In the meantime, as you store power, you must keep your mind focused on the eternal perfection of the self. And the egos out there are all going in the opposite direction. You're imperfect, you're a sinner, you have to grow, you'll never reach the goal. I mean, all these negativities are being bantered out about that, and the methods that go with them are not supporting you. Like I said last week, who in your family or in your neighborhood or in your school is telling you, "Oh, you're a perfect person. You're perfect by nature," and nobody was ever going there. What to say of expressing it to you? There was, pat you on the back, say you'll do better, or don't worry, it'll pass. But basically, you want what doesn't pass ever. It remains the same, and that's the only time you're ever going to feel fulfilled. And you're going to get rid of that unclean feeling that the ego is in charge of things. One of the best things is just that you can do, but the subtlest, therefore the most difficult, is to surrender to the Divine Mother. But you have to somehow find her. She's in hiding like everything else here. So when the witness steps forth, Shakshi Bhutam, the witness of all phenomena, it's a favorite topic of the Vedantists, because that's a very crucial moment in spiritual evolution, if we can allow the term. I see the good Munsons are shaking their head yes to lots of what I'm saying. Is it prompting any words from distant Iceland?
Namaste, Babaji. Namaste, dear friends. Yeah, since you mentioned before yogas, I've been. Can you hear me? I hope you can. Yeah, you probably do. Okay, thanks. Yeah. So in the Bhagavad Gita, I haven't written down anything on paper here, so I'm just going off by what I remember. But in the Bhagavad Gita, at some point, Krishna says to Arjuna, or explains to Arjuna, that he is with the teaching re-establishing karma yoga. Karma yoga at some point had been lost or forgotten, but one of the purposes of this revelation, which takes place in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is also bringing back into the earthly plane this idea of the karma yoga. And obviously it's I don't know when Krishna is supposed to have been alive, probably around 4,000 years ago or something, but it's very clear to see today, even in the Ramakrishna order, they very much accentuate the idea of karma yoga. And as we look back into the history, to the time of Krishna, we're looking back into the time of the Treta Yuga and all these past eras, which were much more harmonious than the one which we are living in nowadays. I mean, the world is crazy, and that's pretty much very clear if you look at things, how we're going outside. But yeah, it's very interesting to see how divine providence brings forth these ideas, so people can be somewhat spared, because going into the Kali Yuga, it's obviously going to be very hard, and there's going to be social strife and different problems taking place, which we're seeing even during this era, these days. But the idea of karma yoga is obviously something which the great masters understood to be very important for our age. And yeah, it's just what's on my mind. I think probably if you could speak about that, that'd be great, Babaji.
Yes, another very timely thing. And I think we'd have to say with partial reservation that karma yoga has been accented in the Ramakrishna mission part of Ramakrishna order. The Ramakrishna Math is still, I think, focused on liberation from all bondage and attaining of samadhi and parinirvana, the highest state. But that just suits the world very well, because as was just said, that so few people are really ready to step into that total trimming away of what we were talking about in Nikhil's point, and what Anurag brought up, with the ego, slimming things down and living sparsely with less. It's one of my God blogs last week, lemonade from sparse lemons, I called it. This is how when the devotees come to the earth, there's no provision here for them. Everything, God's in hiding, mother's not there, all the things that they're used to in a formless state, including peace of mind and bliss, are gone. So here on earth, everything it's almost like a natural sphere of renunciation to them. There's nothing here that satisfies them. So the restlessness of Vivekananda, when you see him restless, looks like Rajas, is really, just this impatience with all of the superficiality that's dancing in front of the senses, and the absence of the Lord is making him restless. You see, so this is how much to the point it is with what you're saying, but try and curve it back toward the whole karma yoga issue is that if the one risk about jnana yoga is, maybe too much analysis going on, you have to be careful to come to some conclusions about it and then live in it. Then the one risk about karma yoga, if maybe one of them, because there might be more for karma yoga, is that even great seers and sages get attached to the works. And when the world is supposed to be unreal, but there you're working so hard to help improve it, then you get attached to seeing that improvement happen. And when it doesn't happen, because the world's not going to do what you tell it to do, and the people aren't either, that is, nature is blind, people are blind, and only you see, and only Brahman sees with the single eye, then karma yoga is a can of worms. It casts it back at you a whole lifetime of work, and you only see some maybe benefit in a few individuals. So that's why you have to work in the spirit of selflessness and follow to the letter of the law that teaching from the Gita that you can engage in the works, but be careful not to take the fruits to yourself. And in that way, then you can stay on that even keel and yogic balance with the fact that these conclusions that you might not yet be aware of when you enter into the field of work is that the world is a place of change and it will never be perfect. And the ego, too, is always going to be insinuating itself in a greater percentage of human beings that inhabit a place like the Bhur Loka. Bhur Loka, when they say that in Sanskrit, means that's the place of physical embodiment, as if there's no other place where beings become that daft. There's no other place where people limit themselves down to a cage of flesh and bones, except the Bhur Loka. I mean, even in hell, it's more of an ethereal place. The hells, but at earth, you've really taken yourself and placed some consciousness in a very tiny container and corked it off for 100 years. And then you have to live with a bunch of other bottles that are corked off, clashing against each other and breaking. So the Bhur Loka, when they say that, it's just basically the earth realm. If you're doing karma yoga there and you're doing it right, then that ability to detach is going to be extra important for keeping peace of mind. And that's why they're most wonderful. You see those beings who work for the good of the world but still are completely 100% focused on the Lord and on the self. Like when they ask Holy Mother, you know, can you think of Brahman all the time and remember your Atman all the time? And she said, oh, how's that possible with all this work doing? But I can put the work aside anytime I want and take my Atman outside and look at it like you would look at a fruit in the palm of the hand, and then put it back in and, you know, hide it away. And so she had this ability to put all those activities aside, and at the same time she was engaged in them with 100% compassion and highest intention for the good of all living beings. That's very difficult to do, and so that's a wonderful thing about a karma yogi or a karma yogini. And you know, we'd be tempted to say that they probably got the other yogas also pretty well mastered inside of themselves. How the four work together is a good subject to study. How the four yogas connect and integrate. So, yeah, the world of works, you can't stay away from it if you're embodied. You have to make your living, and you have to be an example for others. I think being an example for others is one of the more important things about a sannyasin, about the monastic run of life, is that they're going to exemplify and make it possible for others to see that life can be simplified, and as far as the self is concerned, but it can also be very imbued with all kinds of acts for the higher good of people. There's back to Anurag's point about the ego and the witness. I mean, in karma yoga, if the ego's in charge, just go watch the news for a while. You'll see that those people aren't doing things for the good of the world or for people. It's all selfish, and it continues to be selfish and continues to prove itself to be that way. But when you look at the realm of the seers and the luminaries, they're that constant, but they're that constant in selflessness and selfless works. And that's the difference between somebody whose ego is in charge and someone whose witness is operating. And the witness also allows you that facility to draw back. The ego just wants more and more. So it's not hard to see. And then it's not hard. It shouldn't be that hard once you see to make it attainable to yourself and applicable to your life. So karma yoga would be one of the great schools that you would enter into that could quickly teach you these lessons if you're careful. The adventure of consciousness, nice term. The play or sport, the lila part of divine reality. Just be careful when you enter there.
Namaste.
Yes, who's that?
Namaste, Babaji. This is Abhinaya.
Yes, Abhinaya. I haven't seen you for so long. How are you?
Good. A little bit on the sick side, but
Oh.
but I'm feeling better now.
Good. Yeah. Keep that good health.
I wanted to ask, because you've been there's a few of us in the Sangha who's have many years of spiritual practice. What kind of message would you give for the youth, people who are young and who are practicing spiritual practices or having a sadhana? Because we can't really see into the future, or sometimes I don't really acknowledge like the potential of being young. That what would be the message for spiritual aspirants of the youth? What do they have to? I know it's a broad question, but just what really comes into your mind right now for like a message for the youth?
Well, first of all, it's just like, thumbs up. If you described it, if they are what you described, is they have a spiritual life when they're young, wow, I mean, because that's rare in today's life. And I remember all the way up until my 19th year when I was young and getting older that without spiritual life, I wasn't very happy. And then I discovered it, and it broke open all the doorways and windows to possibilities. And it's as if your youth, as Shankara said, is spent just attachment to daily things and responsibilities that are already beginning to weigh you down for adult life and for old age that only get worse. So if you have a spiritual life when you're young, then you come upon youth like that, then you just have to encourage them right away. That's that natural zest for life that they have, which is also accompanied by some knowledge that there's, speaking back to Nikhil's point, is there's some greater attainment to have, like the goal of existence has to be brought forward, so that the wind won't go out of their sails at some time, or the world won't challenge them too heavily, and they'll be tempted to turn back and give up to the journey, the spiritual journey. There's just no doubt that you might say the overall theme of the whole Ramakrishna movement is that you've come here to earth to realize God. There's just no other thing to do but that. So everything here has to be placed in subservience to that, in support of that, in service of that. And so that's the one thing that's most important that is not to be forgotten. So if you're young and you have a natural spiritual life going on, then you probably have spent lifetimes previously understanding that point. Particularly in embodied existence, where the risks, as I was just saying, the Bur Loka, where the risks are so great of falling out and forgetting that. Forgetfulness is, the worst disaster to that end, and remembrance is the greatest boon. Don't forget to remember then. Don't forget to remember. If they have a spiritual life, it means they probably have come upon an influence like a guru, teacher, which is absolutely essential as far as India is concerned, to the path, so that more definition can be brought forward, more intensity can be accumulated for spiritual life, because a spiritual life that continues on without some sort of fulfillment can produce longing. See, and so that longing has to be addressed at some point when they get older, and make sure that the longing for the things of the world that won't ultimately satisfy you, that lesson is still to be learned by youthful people, and some maybe unreachable goals or possibilities are also coming into the picture that one has to be more practical about. That wisdom that dawns in the older people, if they keep to the path, has to be somehow transmitted to the youth. And that can be done through exemplars who can inspire younger people and turn the direction towards the divine, towards reality and away from relativity, towards detachment from things unreal and attachment to the Lord. And then it will depend upon their temperaments, studious, devotional, active. At that point, then the four yogis are brought in And beings can begin to perfect themselves in yoga. That stored up power we were just talking about will become available to you, just like an inheritance that you're waiting for. You see, oh, when I get 20 years old, I get all this money. You see, so because it's been stored up for so long by someone else. So in spiritual life, metaphorically speaking, then that inheritance of stored up power that you've been gathering because you've placed the mind upon the feet of the Lord. You've got interested in the scriptures. You've taken a teacher, and you've seen through the ruse of working for personal gains and power and wealth and progeny and all of that. And now you want to go about it all yogically, consciously. Everything must be done consciously. I was just reading yesterday in Swami Ramakrishnananda. I was reading, and they asked him what the most important thing was. And he says, first of all, everything has to be done consciously. That was how he summated everything down to that one most necessary thing. So before you act, before you think, before you breathe, if possible, you should think the next breath is going to be a conscious one. The next act is going to be conscious. And my thoughts around it are all going to be aware, perceptive, and honed like a laser. All of those things then are in ready and good supply for a youthful person, as Holy Mother said. Just look at the young sannyasins of our mat. I mean, the mat had barely started, and they had all these young men there already. Some of them were advanced souls. So that was all put in place early, even before Rani Rashmani went sailing down the river and saw some land that the temple, before the temple was even built. So all of that was in place according to the Divine Mother's will. As we know now, looking back on brief, short, recent history of the Ramakrishna order, that all of these young people were already beginning to get attracted to that great power. And that great power has got another expression called SRV, and that's why we're all gathered here, because that came west. And when Vivekananda left the West, he left those germs, and it needed to be fomented. So it needs to grow. So if you've spent some years in spiritual life, as you were just saying, some of us in SRV have been here for even decades, then look to the fruition of that kind of end and use the means important for it. Store up that power, but keep in mind that as Holy Mother says, Divine Mother Durga says in the Srimad Devi Bhagavatam, the victory's already been gained. So they're asking her about the future and what better things can happen and how things can benefit. She said, the goal's already been attained. It's all there. Which is what I see when I look back to the first year of SRV. And people talk about, will it survive? Will it grow? And I said, it doesn't matter because it's already a fact. It was a fact before it even started. That's what she means by the victory has already been gained. So doubt, fear, where are those things when you have that kind of inner vision based on the ground of existence, the truth of what is, pure being, which can never be outstripped or outrun and will always be in existence. So that's where, go back to your Advaita and school yourself again. Hear those truths again and again until they drive so deep in you that you'll never forget. And each time you're young, if you take many lifetimes. And in each youthful period of that life, you'll be one of those rare souls that has only to look forward to the wondrous play of the Lord for years to come. For lifetimes innumerable, if that's what it is, but it's not like, oh God, how many lifetimes do I have to suffer through now? And until I get enlightenment, it's like, be illumined, be thee perfect. Even as our Father is in heaven is perfect. Chaitanya whole. Be yourself right now. Why wait? We're not into post-mortem emancipation in Vedanta, as my teacher said. We're into recognize that Divine Mother is right now. In fact, I was thinking, and people who are, expression my sister used to use, quit pissing and moaning. So if you were complaining around the house, quit pissing and moaning. So basically, I think, well, the opposite of that would be just to make a list of everything you have. Let's see, I have Brahman. I have myself, the Atman. Oh, gee, I have the Divine Mother. My goodness, I have Vedanta. I have a teacher, a guru that teaches me Vedanta, that keeps my mind clear. I have good food. I have the ability to distinguish what is different, what is good food and what isn't good food. I have my health. I have a human birth. It's supposed to be one of the greatest boons. So you just go down a list and see, just list all these things and then walk up to the Lord and said, I'm so sorry I was pissing and moaning last week. So I'll never do that again. Let's see. Who has a few last words for us in the 5 minutes remaining?
Babaji, it's Meredith, or Shri Shanti. Great to see you. Good to hear everyone. I just had a quick question. I was reviewing some of the teachings from the series, the class series on the darshanas. And you'd mentioned false idols in nature during one of the classes. We were discussing the power of nature. And I was trying to bring some to mind of what like a false idol in nature would be. Like I think of false idols as, well, images, like could be images of, like in Christianity, I think false idols were like maybe images or statues of beings, whereas in Vedanta that seems different. Just confused me as I was saying that out loud about it being a false idol. But yeah, well, I guess the question is that just what are false idols in nature? An example of some of those.
I think a more advanced, deeper look at false idols would probably, in Vedanta, would probably mean, the body is a false idol. It's not so much like, oh, I'm looking out, and I'm crafting something out of stone, and then I'm offering a flower in front of it. I mean, Krishna says about rudimentary worship, if you offer me a fruit or a flower, then I accept that, the offering of the devout person, because, they may think that they're offering it to the idol, but he knows they're offering it to the essence of the form that's the idol has come out of. And that would be, in that case, Krishna himself. So that's kind of, Christianity, Hinduism 101 kind of idea of doing worship and offering flowers and burning incense and going to church and all that, the more conventional run of religion. But I think in Vedanta, you can just think of probably the falsest of all idols would be this human body. I mean, it can be looked at as a temple. It can be looked at as a great boon, as I just said. But if people come into the world of name and form, that they covet the body more than anything else. They protect the body more than anything else. They spend more time on the health of the body than anything else. And it begins to replace, that's where that ego comes from and the witness goes away. The human body begins to replace the image of God with the image of a monkey You see, you know that story about the sculptor starting with a huge mass of stone, and he works on it forever. He wants to make a great, a great god. And when he gets it done, he looks at it, and he's just made a monkey. See, and so something went wrong in his sculpting. And so basically, the mind, when it comes into the realm of name and form, no doubt that mankind, man, woman, is the highest of all forms here. But you're not yet used to the idea that the form has to come from somewhere, like from formlessness. That would be the philosophical move you'd make. In science and worldliness, you would go toward the coming together of parents, to produce an offspring and so forth. But philosophically, you go toward before the parents, there was, where did they come from? And so you're tracing everything back to a higher idol, if you want to put it that way. Ishvara then becomes that highest ideal the human mind can comprehend, is Ishvara. That's how Vivekananda defines God. Of course, that's God with form. You haven't yet come upon God beyond form, which is actually your true nature. So it's very odd and ironic that that hasn't become the greatest idol. Maybe for the Advaitists, that has become the greatest idol, if you wanted to use the term that way, because they're just thinking in terms of formlessness. And so they don't have any doubt or any fear about giving up the body, which for a while was the idol. So some of that in a short amount of time, because we asked the question right near the end of our session here. But I would say that, Vedanta takes a deeper look at what people idolize, and probably takes that deeper look and says, I think I want to draw back from what most people think of as being the most desirable of attainment. And they are already feeling, like back to Abhinaya's question about the youth, some of them are already feeling like what's here is not going to be ultimately satisfying. And the quicker they're dissatisfied with it, the better for them. That's the ironic thing. It's not like you want to see people walking around pissing and moaning and all morose and everything because they've realized that the world's unreal. But to wake up to that fact is the beginning of a spiritual life. And that's what's hiding bliss. I mean, joy, elation, bliss is all hiding behind that realization that the mind has been courting and playing with too many false idols. So it's a very good question. It deserves more time, but actually we've come to the end of our time. So let's end with a chant and gather for God Blogs in an hour, if you have the time. And then tomorrow morning's class will finish this series on Vedanta's perfection and the storing up of yogic power. Om Shanta Mahanto Nivashanti Shanto Vashanta Yat Lokahitam Charantaha. There are luminaries on this earth, silent and great, who, like the coming of the spring season, bring about the well-being of the world and all its living beings. May that peace betide us. May higher wisdom dawn upon us. May all see the face of truth and be fortified by the armor of love and goodwill. Oh, peace, peace, peace. Peace be unto us, peace be unto all. Om Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om Tat Sat.